Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm very excited to be speaking with Lori Jean Glass, who is an educator, mentor, public speaker, and certified relationship professional and bereavement coach. She's the CEO and founder of Pivot, a relational alignment group comprised of trained coaches and therapists certified in the Pivot process, which we will learn all about momentarily. Lori Jean's personal experience is broader to her current work, which focuses on those who struggle in their adult relationships based on attachment wounds of the past. Her book, Healthy Adult, Pivot from Fantasy to Reality, Confusion to Clarity, Isolation to Connection, is available wherever books are sold. And welcome to Uncorking a Story, Lori Jean Glass.
Well, thank you for having me.
Lori Jean, I have to ask, where does your story begin?
Well, that's a really heavy question with my particular story, because if I'm listening to what you're actually saying, which is where does your story begin? It actually begins in a hotel room in Chicago where I was contemplating and even engaging in possibly ending my life. I had so much trauma that resulted in so much drama that I didn't really know how to live. And the shame and the pain just, cloaked me like the heaviest coat you could ever wear. And I didn't know what to do.
So, obviously you and I are talking now. So you made it out of that hotel room in Chicago. How did you do that?
Clearly. And that was over 20 years ago. And what happened was that I miraculously picked up the phone. I had got a little courage to be able to swallow some pills by drinking some vodka. And my thinking wasn't straight. So I called a therapist that I had been sentenced to work with from my work, because I was A-type personality and excelled at my work, and they didn't want to lose me, but could see that I was losing myself. So I called her, and she answered the phone that night. And it was long ago where we didn't have smartphones. So she basically saved my life. And she said, if you kill yourself, you'll leave your children with exactly what your mom left you, because I am the daughter of a mother who committed suicide. So that kind of woke me up. And that was the beginning of my journey to become who I am today.
So what was your profession at the time? And when you were in that hotel room in Chicago, what were you doing?
I was in sales. I was a top sales rep for a beauty supply company. And sales.
Okay. Sales. So how did you jump from sales to sort of, writing this book, founding the Glass House, designing the Pivot process? Bridge me a little bit to that.
Absolutely. So I started a journey of trying to get help, and the help was very confusing to me. I would meet people, and I love therapists, and I love self-help, and there's many great ways to do personal growth work. The challenge was there was so much trauma that I was getting mixed messages. It was almost like, wow, that's a lot of trauma. Oh, that's too bad. Oh, well, that must be so sad. And I was dissipating the emotions, but I wasn't getting any solutions to how to really shift that inside of me so that I could live a healthier life and have better relationships with other people. So I started looking around and engaging in different types of modalities. And over time, I don't know, it was, maybe one might say it was divinely inspired. I just started thinking about who I am and how I came to be, and started doing a lot of writing and synthesizing about how to help people. And that was really, I know that probably sounds weird to your listeners, but it was really that kind of core and that basic in the beginning. Then what happened was I became a brand consultant, and I was branding companies because I love marketing. I have an eye for it and I appreciate it. And I started working for a woman who I knew, and I had met actually in a support group, and was actually her mentor, if you will, in that arena. And she was starting this center for people once they got sober, they could go and stay in this environment. And I approached her and she hired me to brand her. And I ended up actually seeing there was an opportunity there. And I brought her all the stuff that I was creating to help people with deep attachment wounds. And she decided to hire me. And that was the start of jumping into working in a licensed treatment facility for people with mental health and addiction problems. And that was where it started.
You just use the term attachment wounds and deep attachment wounds. What do you mean when you say attachment wounds?
Well, what I mean is that, there's a concept, a psychology concept called attachment disorder. And that comes from a general concept called attachment theory, where we do now know and understand that people become a product of their environment. And when they're young, they don't attach securely to a caregiver or parent, they can have a very complicated life when it comes to relationships.
Okay.
And I like to call it wounds because I like to take the diagnostic terminology out of the conversation.
Yeah. So is it a one size fits all thing with attachment wounds, or are there different
No.
types of attachment wounds?
Totally different. People run in pivot. We call it anxious, avoidant, ambivalent, and secure. And that was the struggle. And I go deep into that in the book. That was really like a lot of the struggle that I was having, because my father died when I was very young and we were there and it was tragic. And that was my first abandonment wound. And unfortunately, my mom had a hard time showing up after that and eventually ended up killing herself when I was a teenager over years of different types of trauma. I've got sexual abuse in my history, just a lot of stuff. A lot of the trauma didn't make the book because I didn't want, who wants to read it?
Right. Right.
It's heavy, it's just so heavy. So I picked like the highlights of what people can understand and went with that.
If you can call them highlights, right? It's.
I know. Since it's my story, I can kind of.
Yes, sure. But so the way in which we sort of these attachment wounds kind of form when we're very young, they don't just go away. They're always with us, right?
Yeah, they kind of shape shift as we grow up, depending on the developmental stage that we're in. So like we all have these developmental stages that we go through in order to become adults. And there's the child stage, and then there's the adolescent stage. And oftentimes these wounds and these attachment styles will take on different nuances as you grow into these different developmental stages.
Yeah, as I was reading the book, I found myself nodding a lot at the avoidant attachment, because I felt like I was really identifying with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I at times in my life and still now, I've been avoidant. I avoid conflict. And that's something that I've been really trying to work on. But I don't want to tell tales out of school, but I live with somebody who's got some anxious attachment.
Yeah, that's the common bond. That's the dance. We call that the co-addictive tango. That's the dance.
Why is that? Why are people who are avoidant and people who are anxious like almost like a magnet and metal?
I'll tell you, because we're drawn to what's familiar regardless of merit. And sometimes people are trying to have a corrective experience. So they'll go back into a situation that needs to be corrected. So there's something with avoidance, and I don't like to stereotype, because one of the things I love about Pivot and I love about people is that we are unique far beyond just our thumbprint or fingerprint, right? We all have our own way of being because of all of our experiences in the world. They inform who we are today. And, but there are similar patterns. So with avoidant people, I really find that deep in their core, they really long to be seen, but weren't seen.
Yeah.
So does that resonate?
Absolutely. And I'll share, I have a twin brother who was, very sick as a kid. So he got a lot of my mother's attention. I mean, I
Yeah.
love Jimmy to death. Don't get me wrong, but I found from a very young age, I was left with my grandmother, who was tremendous experience. I mean, the woman was there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about her. But from a very young age, she was teaching me. I'm talking like 4 or 5 years old, like how to cook. I mean, I learned how to make her tomato sauce. The best thing in the world. One of the best gifts was ever given was an Italian grandmother.
Oh,
So I mean, I was
I
learning.
relate to that. One of the best gifts I was given was a West Virginia grandmother.
Well, there you go. But she taught me how to cook, and from a very young age, I was very self sufficient. And I actually get angry with people who just can't figure things out for themselves. Um, it
That's
you know
that makes sense.
it drives me like I like have a negative visceral. If somebody asks me for help, depending on who it is, I will be like, why can't you just figure that out for yourself, like I had to do? But my brother got a lot of that attention, whereas I was left to figure things out. Now, it made me very self-sufficient, but it also left me like feeling as if I didn't matter, or that my voice, my emotions, didn't matter, because I was the one as a kid. If I expressed some kind of negative emotion to my mother, like I was always expected to be the happy one, right? And I was a pretty happy kid. But if I ever was not playing that part, or if I wasn't in that role, um, uh, she would get very upset. I mean, it was almost like I rocked the boat way too much, and it kind of shut me down a little bit. And I'm only learning this about myself at 47 years of age.
Mhm.
But that's that. I mean, that's briefly. That's why it was resonating with me what you just said.
Mhm. Yes, yes. And in the context, I know we don't have time to go over all of it today, but in the context of pivot, it's your responsibility, right? To take what is your healthy adult and go back and kind of help stabilize your energy when you find yourself getting upset with people, and having compassion for the fact that they don't come from the environment you came from, and that they really asking for help is really their healthiest move,
Yeah,
because they most likely maybe had a very different environment.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true.
And the anxious people that probably drive you crazy after a while are anxiously trying to find the help because they it wasn't there, you know, it wasn't there.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Um,
and if they did figure it out, it was criticized. So they're always worried that they're not going to do it right. So they want to make sure they're going to do it right.
Um, you mentioned something in the book, and this line really stuck with me. You're right. I believe the main reason there's so much conflict in our world and ourselves and in our relationships is our collective tolerance for unhealthy existence.
That's right.
Tell me about this collective tolerance for unhealthy existence. What is that, and where does it come from?
Well, it's we don't this is hard to say. Many people don't take personal responsibility, and we allow other people, we get into everybody else's dance. We dance with each other's places that don't allow us to take personal responsibility because we don't know how. And it just feeds off of each other. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
It's almost like if we don't find a way to be able to show up and be all of who we are, right? We rise strong, like Brene Brown says, and we have to be authentic and transparent when it's appropriate with the right boundaries. Then what happens is that we will just tolerate it in a way with other people, because we won't speak to it, because people don't know what to do with appropriate anger. People don't really know what to do with internal boundaries. It's just this, it's a lack of emotional intelligence. We don't even value emotional intelligence enough to teach it in our schools. So that's a very heavy statement, and it encompasses all of what I just said, and probably even a lot more.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Because initially I was reading that as, why do we tolerate bad relationships? But this is kind of something different.
Well, I mean, but it's that too. No, it's that too, because it's like anger, for example. We tolerate bad relationships because we're too afraid to get angry and speak our truth. because anger is not bad if it's done in a healthy way. We tolerate relationships that aren't good because we're drawn to what's familiar regardless of merit, and we want to have a corrective experience, and I call it waiting for Christmas. We're going to stay in it until it changes, and it's not going to change until we have enough of a motivation and a commitment to ourselves to lean into it, to stay the distance until we can create change within the context of the relationship. But instead, people will just walk around the perimeter of their own equators in relationships and be afraid to jump in. Too messy. It's too messy.
What happens in
People are
situations?
afraid of mess.
I completely agree. And for someone like me who shrieks away at conflict, there was a long period of time where I was afraid of mess. I'm sort of getting over that now. But it's still there. But what I'm curious about is in those situations where the relationship is not ideal. And one person starts the process of change within themselves to really, I call it doing the work. And the other person does not. The other person, might be happy or comfortable with the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
How does one work through that situation? Is it leaving the relationship, or is there like another solution there?
Well, I think it always starts with an invitation, right? An invitation. I think one of the reasons why people don't step into resolving conflict in a relationship is the fear of that it's just going to create more conflict. Let me say that again. The number one reason why in the couples I work with, why one of them might not step into repair and restoring it is because they're afraid it's going to just create more conflict. That's a fact, because you know what? It usually does. When people start disarming all the things that they're using to protect themselves or to hide or not disclose something that's going on, the minute you start doing that, and really getting into what the challenges might be or what's lacking, that's going to initially create a bit of a rift, and people don't want to go there. So, the first thing you have to do is both be willing to just commit to the beauty of getting in there to repair and restore the relationship. Like for me, the relationships that I have with people that are really close to me are the people that feel safe enough and respect me enough to be able to say, hey, LJ, you really hurt me, and I want to talk to you about that. I want to understand what you were thinking. That to me is healthy. But to never approach it because someone's afraid that it's going to get messy, that's where we limit ourselves. We limit ourselves with our own beliefs that we can't show up and be strong enough to connect.
Right.
And for people's credit, the reason why we created Pivot, and I say we because it's a group of us, many of us now, that come together and it's a we process, is because it has high impact solutions that are uniquely created to be individualized for everybody that comes to it, because we're all unique.
Right. Kind of going back to those attachment wounds, everyone's experiences are going to be unique, and it certainly can't be
Very unique.
Yeah.
Very, like I hope when you read my book, you got a clear picture of my developmental parts. I have an inner child that is so sensitive, and she wants to be held and loved and protected, and she needs to be safe. But I have a teenager that is spirited, man. She is just, you want her on vacation.
That's right. Party time.
Oh yeah, she's fun and she's creative, but she gets in a little trouble. Right. I've got to manage that part because I didn't have boundaries. My mom was drinking and my stepdad was traveling and we were moving around all the time. So it's like, guns a-blazing, full force. And then my adult was trying to, okay, how do I live with this wild child inside of me and this sensitive wounded? So I'd get into a relationship and just go back and forth between the two. That's why it's so important that we understand our developmental parts and reparent ourselves. That's what John Bradshaw's work was all about, was reparenting. But how do we actually do it? How do we actually do it? And that's one of the things, one of the many things that we can help people with and do help people with at Pivot. And that's where your initial question about what, that's what I did for, 9-10 years at this licensed treatment center. We actually went in and helped people repair their attachment wounds. That was a big part of the work that we did. It was extremely effective. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because unless you identify and know those attachment wounds, I imagine that you and repair them or just understand them. I guess coming to an understanding of them
is the first part.
It's
you
the
have
first
to
part.
understand them in the first part, but just understand them. It's kind of like that concept, faith without works is dead. We can understand, but what do we do? That's key. What are the repairs that we do, and how can we identify those parts of self when they get activated in relationship with other people? Because it happens at work. We see it we work with executives. It happens everywhere.
Right. Because we're not just talking about romantic relationships here. That's where my mind typically goes, but it's really relationships with anybody. It's professional relationships. It's personal. It's
a lot in parenting. It's amazing how many parents are parenting from a place of making sure they don't give their kids what happened to them, and they miss their kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me about, because I know it's not just an Ozzy Osbourne song, the Crazy Train. Because I definitely, as a old metalhead, I totally clued into
we actually have a song. I think you can get it on iTunes still, called Crazy Train, that one of the women that worked with me wrote and produced. It's actually really cool. Crazy train, my thoughts are going wild. Crazy train, I left my inner child. Crazy train. I know, I forget the words, but
well, we'll find it. We'll find it.
Find it
in the background at some point. But talk to me about
this
the Crazy
part,
train.
though. You have to hear this part. I'm headed down the tracks to a deep dark hole. It kind of sounds like a bit like a female Johnny Cash. It's kind of cute. But
I was getting a Johnny Cash vision in my head as you were singing those first.
Not by my voice, I'm sure.
Just by the content.
Okay, good. So explain Crazy Train. Yeah, this is a metaphor that I came up with because in the beginning, when I started doing my personal growth work, I kept thinking and hearing the message that kind of stayed with me, that I was crazy, because I felt crazy. I really did, because sometimes I would do things and not understand why I would do them out of a place of pain, or because I was seeking safety, right? Like clinging on to somebody I didn't really want, but I couldn't let go. It looked crazy to people around me, but I wasn't crazy. I was just really trying to repair that wounded part in me that really wanted to attach deeply with someone. And so when I started thinking about what actually people do, it dawned on me that, people set up self-destructive behavior, and sometimes are aware of it long before they get there. So I was thinking about a metaphor I could use so that people could actually have more consciousness around being able to help themselves and stop the behavior. And the train seemed perfect, because people aren't crazy, but their actions look crazy. And so the crazy train seemed appropriate. And the metaphor of a train was appropriate because I serve it up in 3 parts. The first thing you do is you head to the train station, and then you buy the ticket, and then you board the train. So it's kind of like you're sitting at home and you head to the train station. You really shouldn't go on your partner's computer, but you can't help yourself because you think there's something going on, or he's having maybe there's somebody that he works with at the office that you might be jealous of, or whatever it is. I'm just using this as an example. So headed to the train station is to plan to go and get on his computer when he's putting the kids down to bed. And so and heading to the crazy train. Buying the ticket is going in and getting on his computer and busting into it and looking at all this personal stuff. And then riding the actual train is then approaching him and and creating a fight, creating drama, creating the kids are in the house. It's a mess now because that person might have found something on his computer that doesn't even prove anything's going on, but because they're already locked into this belief that he's not being faithful, that they have to go and find out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost at that point.
That's right.
Yeah.
But people do it all the time with even little things, it's like, but you can tell, when you're about ready to do something that might not end well. And it's just a metaphor, because we have clients that call our coaches and they'll say, hey man, I'm heading to the train station. Stuff like that. So it's just a way that it can bring consciousness quickly.
Do the people, do people who have different sort of attachment wounds head to the train station in different ways or board the train in different ways? I mean, are there patterns, or are anxious people more likely to be going through someone's computer, or avoiding people more likely to do something?
Tons of patterns. And you have to also understand that pivot isn't just for people with attachment wounds. People can have wounds in their adult life and set off a series of complicated relationships. People can go avoidant because of trauma that might happen when they're 25 years old and maybe had a really good childhood. So it's not just for people with the kind of attachment that we've been talking about on this podcast. We make that pretty clear too.
Yeah.
But yes, they can. So like an avoidant personality is going to get on the train, but go back into the caboose and hide. They're not going to create any conflict. They won't show up and have the tough conversation that needs to happen. They won't lean into solution. They'll just disappear even more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolute total sense. Total sense, because
they avoid the conflict.
Right. And it'll magically go away until it bubbles up and, the volcano bursts.
Or the anxious person comes back into the caboose and drags your ass right out of there.
Been known to happen. One more thing I want to ask about before we talk about sort of the upcoming or forthcoming version of the book. You're right. Waking up after 10 to 15 years of tolerating an empty relationship can be destabilizing in later years of life. I'm sure there are people who are nodding their heads listening to that saying, oh my gosh, that's me. What does that mean? Can be destabilizing in later years of life?
Well, it gains momentum if you don't deal with it. You end up doing like what I did, blowing your marriage up, because you don't have any way to resolve it, to understand what you're doing. It builds momentum. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it just gets worse over time. It's like a wound, if we have an infection and we don't treat it, it's just going to get worse, right? It's like some of these wounds that we have, it's just going to get worse if we don't tend to them. I went for years without talking about any of the stuff I went through, years, and it would come out sideways, and then my life was not good. I didn't want to live, and I had so many great things to live for, but I couldn't live because I was still carrying all that pain from so long ago that remained unprocessed. That's why I love Bessel van der Kolk. Your body keeps the score. My body held every memory of every trauma that I ever was faced with. And then as an adult, I could no longer avoid them. They would just bubble up in the most unexpected ways. I love the cake story that I tell in the book about when my husband to be at the time bought me that cake, and it wasn't the cake that my mother used to bake for me. And I told him the story about how that was the only day she would show up for me. And when my birthday rolled around and he bought me a cake, and it wasn't the cake that my mom bought for me, which by the way, you can never find in a bakery anyway, I couldn't manage and tolerate that feeling of not being seen. And we had a fight about the fact that this poor guy after work went to a bakery and bought me a carrot cake. instead of my homemade cake. I mean, it sounds crazy. This is the part that sounds crazy,
Yeah.
right? And it looks crazy, but internally it made sense when I went back and did the work and unpacked it all. I wanted my mom's cake, and why I couldn't be a healthy adult and just thank him for the carrot cake and say, God, I miss the cake my mom used to bake for me. I actually really miss my mom. I wish she could have gotten the help she needed. I couldn't have that conversation. Instead, man, that guy got in trouble because he didn't have my cake. People go through stuff like that all the time, Mike. You'd be so surprised. That's why I love unpacking people's stories and helping them make sense of it. And then they can have compassion for themselves and see why they did the things that they did. Well, when someone's coming up out of avoiding energy, usually where they sit is in the pocket of frustration and anger for a minute. Because when you stop avoiding and you start looking at what's really going on, it's hard to look at sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely fair.
And it's different to feel it through anger than it is to feel it through the pain and shame. So a lot of people will pivot into more of an anger, kind of frustrated tension. Anger doesn't always look big. That's not always anger. Anger comes out sideways. Like anger can come out for you with like, why are they asking for help?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, I know we've been talking about the pivot process, and of course you do have a book, but not while I think the principles can be learned through the book, I imagine there's something a little bit more hands-on. You want to talk about where people can go if they wanted to learn more about the pivot process?
Sure. Yeah. They can go to lovetopivot.com. That's our website, and look at all of our services and engage with us there. They can fill out an inquiry and we can call and have that conversation. That's really the best way to find out more information about pivot. If they're curious at all about how, like, walking through somebody's story of what it does actually for you, I think I would say the book does a pretty good job with that. Would you say that, Mike? You read the book,
No,
right?
I read the book, and I understand there's a new version coming out, new edition coming out.
Yeah. We have a new edition getting released and audio version coming out shortly. So that'll be awesome.
When's the new edition coming out?
That should probably be available in a few weeks. So Amazon.com will start carrying the new version. And then the audio will probably be about 3-4 months.
Now, did you do the audio? Did you do the narration on it?
Yes, I'm doing it. Mm-hmm.
How's that process going?
We're just getting started.
Okay.
So I'm entering it. I imagine I'm going to be drinking a lot of tea.
I think you will. I think you will. When I did an audio version of one of my books, I started it myself because I have a home, recording studio, and I quickly learned that this was not my forte. So I immediately hired someone else to do it. And it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made because his voice was so perfect for who this character was. He just completely nailed it. So, all right. So I have some questions for you. I call it the hot seat. This is how I typically end my conversation.
Well, I'm Sagittarius. I love being on the hot seat.
Oh, there you go. All right. So the first one's a softball. What was your favorite TV show when you were a kid?
Oh, that's easy. We didn't have TV because I grew up in the national parks. But when we would travel and we would go to like hotels and stuff, I loved Bewitched.
Oh my God, Bewitched. Now, which Darren were you a fan of? New Darren or old Darren? Or did it not matter?
The old Darren.
Old Darren. It's got to be old Darren, right?
Yeah. Like
the OG Darren.
Why do you even ask that question? Like
people, it's like Ginger or Marianne. People have opinions on it.
That's true.
So, okay, I'll take it. Bewitched. Did you see the movie Bewitched with Will Ferrell? What do you think?
That was okay.
Yeah, it's fine. A couple of laughs, but it didn't necessarily capture the magic of of the old show.
Yeah.
All right.
And I also liked Perry Mason when I got a little older.
Have you seen the Perry Mason sort of prequel reboot on HBO?
No.
All right. So Matthew Reese from The Americans, who is, if I
Uh-huh.
had a man crush on anybody, it would be Matthew Reese. I mean, there's something about the Welsh, but he plays a young Perry Mason, and you
Uh-huh.
kind of see him sort of. He was a private investigator, and then something happens, and he goes to law school and becomes Perry Mason, the attorney. It is actually fantastic. So
Oh my gosh. Will you text me the info?
I will. I obviously do that. So Perry
Okay.
Mason, Matthew Reese, HBO, free plug for them. All right. So you've written a book. You're kind of going through your second edition is coming out. How do you feel when you're staring at a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen, depending on how you write?
I I feel excited, but I love to create. That doesn't it's like interesting to me. It's like, let's go.
Excited, not anxious.
No, 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 no. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just I've been so open about my story, and there's so many parts of it that I had to work through a lot of shame that I just really kind of celebrate. I hope this doesn't come across as arrogant, but I actually finally like who I am. And I give myself permission to just be, And so a blank page to me means let's go.
All right.
Let's create. It doesn't make me anxious.
I love it. I
But I
love it.
also am a talker, so I write through recording what I want to say first before I write it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm.
So do you do like a text to speech thing, or is it?
Yeah, I
All right,
do. Hmm.
all right, very cool.
Hmm.
All right, number 3.
Hmm.
What lesson about writing or publishing do you feel like you had to learn the hard way?
Um, no, no, I don't. Not the hard way. I mean, let me take that back. Everything in my life, I've learned the hard way. I've had COVID twice.
You're a two-time winner there.
I'm a two-time with different strands. And I was telling someone the other day, I said, it's just so interesting how the universe just wants me to experience stuff to be able to know it. I can't, that's been like my life, experience it. So I'm really in acceptance of that. And that was pre the vaccinations for the first time, very, very sick, and then post, but still anyway. So, yeah, I don't think it would be that it was hard.
Mhm.
No, it was interesting to me, but it was a journey. That's probably a different story for another day.
Yeah.
My book's kind of unique in the sense where it's a combination of a memoir plus a how-to, and publishers don't like that typically.
Yeah.
They want you to pick one or the other. And also, when I was inquiring about all the whole way that we go about publishing books was changing. I'm older. And so, back years ago, it was very different when you were get curious about how to publish a book than it is today.
Yeah. There's so many more avenues open to people.
So many.
Whether it's traditional, whether it's independent, whether it's a hybrid. Um,
Mhm.
Oftentimes I hear the hardest thing about writing the book isn't writing the book, it's publicizing it, and all the marketing that they have to do, because so much of the marketing is left up to, even if you have a big publishing house behind you, so much of the marketing is left up to the author. That's the most common answer I get to that is doing promotion is the sort of the lesson they learned the hard way.
Yeah. The book for me was just really kind of a vehicle to build Pivot.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like it's got its own journey. I don't put a lot of effort and energy into marketing the book the traditional way. It's just part of what we have to offer to get people to understand what we do on a deeper level.
Yeah.
In that context, I've never really gone out and effectively said, okay, I'm going to really market this book.
Um,
Especially, I don't want it to get too out there because I am dating again. You don't want to read that book.
no, I'd read that book in a heartbeat.
Yeah, but
Um,
you wouldn't swipe right.
well, you never know.
Yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't sell
My
yourself
friend,
short.
I
LJ,
know,
can I call you
I
LJ?
know. I'm joking. Yes, you can call me LJ. Yeah.
Actually, I don't even know what swiping right means.
Oh, good.
it's,
Yeah, you're married. Never mind.
it's That's a foreign term to me. All right,
That's good.
let's go to number 4.
Okay.
What's the best piece of advice you could give to an aspiring author? Let's say somebody else wants to tell their story and get it out there. What words of advice, having gone through the process yourself of getting this book out there, what's the best piece of advice you can give to that person?
Well, the most simple advice that comes up to in my mind right now is just stay true to you. Like, just stay true to you. Figure out what you want to do, what you want to say, and why you're doing this, and just choose you along the way.
Choose you. I like it.
Mhm.
I would call you a success. Kind of understanding your journey, and just even what you said, before, and no, you were not being arrogant, just kind of liking who you are right now. To me, that's a great definition of success. How do you celebrate your success? Do you celebrate your success?
I do. I do in simple ways, just by sharing joy and building the team that we're building right now. This last year and a half, this very small company has popped, and I celebrate with them. I celebrate with family. People are my passion. People are my passion. So when I can celebrate the successes and joy with people that are on the journey with me, because it's not a solo effort. Some coaches just do their own thing and work on their own and build their own business. I've got a team of people. Cindy's one of them,
Mhm.
which I'm sure you probably talked about, and it's just a wonderful environment to share with like-minded people. That's how I like to celebrate it.
There you go.
It's a we effort.
A we, not a me.
That's right.
All right, here's the last one. I call this my Brad Paisley question because A, I love Brad Paisley, but B, he wrote a song called Letter to Me. In the song, he imagines writing a letter to his younger self. So if you could write a letter to your younger self, what would you put in that letter? You don't have to sing it. You just have to tell me what you put in the letter.
Well, I've done that actually with my left hand, my non-dominant hand before. And, the overall sense of it was you're not alone and you have a place in the world. You are loved, and, find your creativity and passion.
What age of a younger LJ are you thinking of there?
I'm thinking of like 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why 5?
Just because, I have a lot of creativity that was, unfortunately not directed in the right way, and it's coming out now. It's been coming out for a while, and that's the age we moved to Mount Rainier National Park, and we lived on the base of the mountain, and I used to go out and I was very creative. I was very creative at that time. Yeah.
All right. Well, I have a sneak attack question for you. So I thought I was done, but I just had one more.
Okay.
What's it like dating now? How would you characterize dating now?
It's really interesting, especially doing what I do for a living. It's fun though, because when you're older, it's you know yourself more. You're more clear on about what you want and need, and you're not so worried about whether or not you're good enough for them. It's more about, your own real estate, which is yourself, like putting that out there first as opposed to what it is that you're looking for. And for me, it's fun because in my younger years, when I would look to find partnership, it was always to heal those wounds that I was unable to heal in myself. I love not having expectations. Like if I meet someone and they're not the right person for me, it's okay. Whereas before, if they weren't the right person for me, I would do everything I could to turn them into the right person.
Right. Right.
Which sounds ridiculous, I know, but I know there's somebody listening that relates to that.
There's no doubt in my mind, but and I'm sure that's not an effective strategy.
No, it doesn't work. No. Talk about more drama. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's fun. But you gotta get comfortable with technology.
Oh, I'm sure. That's what I hear anyway. It's not like the old days.
No. And you gotta be careful.
Some
Yeah.
creepers out there, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. There was
I,
some-
I have a friend who's
I got stories, man.
yeah, that should be for another episode,
Yeah.
dating issues or something like that. But I have a friend who shares his stories with me. Who's sort of dating in his late 40s, and the stories I hear, my mind is blown. But
Oh,
that's
yeah.
for another time. Well, Lori Jean, your book, Healthy Adult Pivot from Fantasy to Reality, Confusion to Clarity, Isolation to Connection, is available at Amazon. And I'm sure people could request it from their local bookstores as well. New edition coming out soon, followed by an audiobook version, which if you're like many people, you put on your headphones, go for a walk, and listen to the audiobook. So that's great. Anything else you'd like to share before we part ways?
I just would like to thank you for having me on here and for having Cindy a while back. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to get curious about, why we write books, because it's a lot of time and effort and energy to do that. And yeah, I think I'd just like to part with saying thank you to you. I'd like to honor you, Mike. How about that?
Well, I'm honored that you're honoring me, and I will say you're welcome. But I'll also thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome.